Welcome to the Happy Nightmares podcast.
Hello, freaky dreamers. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Nightmares podcast, where we talk about everything eerie, strange, and unexplained. Today, we are going to be departing a bit from the world of folklore and diving into the world of entertainment, as we discuss one of my favorite TV series of all time, Dexter. For those of you that don't know, Dexter is a Showtime series that follows the Michael C. Hall character Dexter Morgan, a blood spatter analyst for the Miami PD, as he battles what he refers to as his dark passenger. The basic character outline for Dexter Morgan is that he is a serial killer with a conscience. He has these unquenchable dark urges, but he attempts to use his need to kill to rid the world of other terrible people. No, I'm not going to lie, it took me a couple tries to get into this show, and there's several reasons why. First off, I can guarantee there are a ton of people out there who have not given Dexter a try because they don't believe they will like it, but they would actually love the show. Personally, I am not a fan of extreme gore or gratuitous violence. It's just not my kind of horror. There are so many classic horror movies that I have a hard time getting behind, which I feel like makes me a bit of an outlier in the horror community. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Friday the 13th, etc. I just don't really enjoy those movies. I take that back. I enjoy the movies as they build suspense, because if there's anything that the original 1978 Halloween does well, it's building suspense. There were moments in that movie where the tension was wound so tight that something would happen and make me jump without them even using a loud soundtrack hit or something to heighten the jump scare. Nowadays, almost every movie uses auditory blasts to startle the audience rather than strictly relying on the tension of the scene. What I don't like about those films is just people being hurt. Implied harm is one thing. I can handle it more if it happens off screen and I know it's happening but I don't have to see it. I just don't like seeing people get hurt. Watching some dude get literally chainsawed in half is just not enjoyable to me. I love to be scared, but that isn't really scary to me. It's just gross and uncomfortable without the fun payoff. I know a lot of people love these movies, and I hope I haven't offended any of you. Long live Michael Myers as one of the greatest horror villains of all time. I can recognize and give credit where credit is due. But for me, the aversion to blatant violence and harm is what initially caused friction with the idea of watching Dexter for quite a while. My wife and I actually started watching the first episode, and maybe even watched the first 2 episodes a couple of different times and stopped. And for those of you who feel the same way, who don't like to watch killing and therefore are not even considering Dexter as a potential series that could scratch your entertainment itch, I will say the following. The story arc and character development and relationships in Dexter far overcome any discomfort caused by the fact that he is a serial killer. Now, you will probably experience a bit of a crisis of conscience as you come to realize that you are rooting for a serial killer. That, sadly, is unavoidable, but my goodness, push through that first season and you will be hooked. So, why are we talking about Dexter right now? I mean, the first episode was released on October 1st, 2006, which, fun fact, was exactly 13 days before I got married to my beautiful bride. How's that for a horror connection? We are talking 15 years ago, and the final episode of Season 8, which was the series finale, aired originally on September 22nd, 2013. So we are 8 years removed from this series altogether. And while a series as controversial and captivating as Dexter has continued to gain new fans over the years, it seems like a weird time to bring it up. Am I really that out of touch with current trends? No, thank you very much. I may not be the foremost authority on current pop culture, but there is a very good reason that we are talking about Dexter today. On October 14th, my wedding anniversary, of the year best forgotten, 2020, it was announced that a Season 9 of Dexter was going to be happening. Huge news for fans of the show, because it is never easy to say goodbye to a character that you have grown to love over 8 seasons. And to know that we are going to get another chance to extend their story is exciting in and of itself, but there is a much more hefty reason why this is such a big deal. Let me read you some quotes from articles written after the finale of Dexter Season 8, the last episode. First, Richard Rye, in an article for Vulture, wrote, "As the closing scene faded from my television screen, my reaction wasn't shock or sadness. It was anger. It's the kind of anger you feel after investing so much time into a show that you once loved, only to watch it fizzle out in the most unsatisfying of ways." Next, Brian Lowry in an article for Variety. "Sunday night's series finale, despite its emotional flourishes, merely underscored that this was a series well past its expiration date." And finally, in an article titled "Why Dexter's Finale is the Worst of All Time" by Joseph Garabed for Screen Rant, he says, "The Dexter finale feels forced and wrong because that's exactly what it is." Needless to say, people were a bit outraged by the finale, and as fans of the show, they felt like the ending that was given to a beloved character was a slap in the face of his fans. Initially, I didn't really understand what all the uproar was about. I tend not to read too much into those sort of things. I accept them as they are, and I'm grateful that I got to experience the show, and so on and so on. And while there are countless articles about what could have saved the finale or what could have been changed to make it better, I can guarantee that there is not a single way that they could have ended the show that would have made people happy. When you have a show like Dexter, or Lost as another great example, you have a team of writers who is fantastic at continuing the story and keeping it going, but at some point you have dug a hole that is so deep and filled with mystery that it becomes impossible to figure out how to fill that hole back in and leave the audience feeling satisfied. Alright, so I guess it's time for me to issue a spoiler alert. Here it is. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. If you have any interest in watching the show, maybe do that before you listen to the rest of this podcast episode. I don't know if anything I talk about will ruin it for you, but on the off chance that it does, I don't need that kind of guilt on my shoulders. So, spoilers ahoy! If you keep listening and are disappointed later on because of it, don't say I didn't warn you. Anyway, the fact that a Season 9 is in the works should make it pretty apparent that Dexter didn't die in the Season 8 finale, but that was actually one of the original ideas for how the show would end. Talk about a fitting end for a character who spent his life trying to rid the world of bad people because he himself was a bad person. Ridding the world of himself would have made a lot of sense. When asked about this, the producers of the show defended the decision, stating that they were thinking of the backlash they would receive for killing off a character that so many people loved. It didn't really save them, since the backlash was pretty harsh anyway, but I guess that's beside the point and speaks to what I said earlier about the fact that you can't really make people happy with an ending to a show like this. While I am able to recognize the nice bookend quality of a Dexter dies ending, I'm really glad they didn't go that route. I am one who always wants there to be a possibility of more somewhere down the road. I'm still holding out hope for another Harry Potter book at some point, and we wouldn't be getting a Season 9 of Dexter if they had killed him off. What I have more of an issue with, as I go back and read about what the issues were with the finale, is the fact that Dexter abandoned his son, Harrison. Throughout the series, Dexter struggles with making human connection and letting down his walls to relationships for obvious reasons. As a killer with a conscience, Dexter knew what he was and didn't want to put good people in danger by allowing them into his life. This encapsulates the underlying theme of the show that stretches from episode 1 all the way through to the finale. Can Dexter be both a serial killer and a good person? In spite of these internal battles, Dexter finds love at the end of Season 3 and actually gets married to a woman named Rita. And in the beginning of Season 4, we find Dexter married and living with Rita, her 2 children, Aster and Cody, and his and Rita's new baby, Harrison. This 4th season, one of the best of the series, according to a lot of people, including myself, primarily revolves around a couple of things. One being Dexter trying to live this double life as a family man and a serial killer. The other being his arch-rival relationship with a man named Arthur Mitchell, also known as the Trinity Killer. Initially, Dexter sees Arthur as someone that he can learn from. After all, he is also a serial killer and a family man who has committed murders for over 30 years without being discovered. Throughout all of Season 4, Dexter battles life as a father and a husband and a murderer. He learns what he can from Arthur, and in the Season 4 finale, again, spoiler alert, just giving another one here, Dexter kills Arthur, and then comes home only to find that earlier that same day, Arthur had killed Rita, and Dexter's son Harrison is found sitting in a pool of his mother's blood, as she lies dead in the bathtub. This scene is symbolic for so many reasons. It is a confirmation that Dexter can't have it both ways. He can either be 100% a family man committed to his relationships, or he can satisfy his dark passenger, but he cannot do both. Also, finding Harrison in the pool of blood very closely mirrors Dexter's own origin, as he witnessed his mother's murder and was found sitting in a pool of her blood with his brother when he was a small child. This terrible end to his happy family doesn't end Dexter's desire to try and have the best of both worlds. He is a committed father who legitimately loves his son. During Season 8, Dexter is supposed to move to Argentina with Harrison and a woman named Hannah McKay, but that doesn't happen. Dexter finally has the firm realization that he can't have both. No matter where he goes, his bloody past will find him, and if he truly wants Harrison to be safe, he needs to separate from him completely. This all makes complete sense. There is a literal hurricane approaching, and Dexter speeds off into the ocean toward the hurricane with his sister's body, which I'm not going to go into here. He says his goodbyes to Hannah and Harrison, drops his sister's body into the ocean, and heads his boat right into the center of the hurricane. It's emotional, it's sad, it's a fitting end, it's torture to watch, and so on and so on. It's everything you want from a finale, aside from all of the other supporting characters' loose ends, which I'm also not going to go into here.
Oh, come on.
And then it happens. The scene that ruined it all for so many people. We get a final scene that shows Dexter, not dead, but very much alive, sporting a fluffy beard and a flannel shirt, living a solitary life as a lumberjack somewhere in the woods. The big question here is why? His reasons for heading into the hurricane seemed so obvious, and ending his life seemed the only logical way to keep the people he loved safe. So it's obvious that the decision was made to keep Dexter alive just so the fans would be happy that he wasn't dead, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense. He has abandoned his son, and the new love of his life. He has guilt about the death of his sister. He has gotten away with all of his crimes and all of the mistakes. And all of this makes his death oddly satisfying when you stop to think about it. There is some implication that he has essentially doomed himself to a life of torture. Perhaps what he feels he deserves. He has to live out the rest of his life with the pain of what he is missing. It's not quite the epic fate that people hoped for. Also, there is the fact that Hannah, the woman now in charge of raising Dexter's son, is also a serial killer. So he hasn't really saved Harrison from anything with that regard, has he? It is a tough thing to watch a television series or book series or whatever come to an end. It's far tougher to be satisfied by that ending. There has only been one ending that has completely satisfied me, and that was the ending of Stephen King's Dark Tower book series. I'm not going to give away much, but I'm going to issue, yes, a third spoiler alert, because I really believe that what I'm about to say, even though it's not specific, it's pretty specific, would completely obliterate the satisfaction that it gave me as a reader. So, if you think you might ever read the Dark Tower books by Stephen King, or you're reading them now and you're not done, stop listening. It pains me to tell you to stop listening to my podcast, but stop listening. You can come back and finish it later. The last book of that series, self-titled as The Dark Tower, ends with the exact same line as the first line of the first book. It's not that simple. I mean, it is that simple, but there's so much more. The whole story comes full circle, and there is a realization that is just mind-blowing. There are things implied by the ending of that book that are so satisfying as a reader. I don't know if other readers felt that way about it, but honestly, I could do a full episode of this podcast on the Dark Tower series ending alone. And maybe I'll do that at some point. I'm not going to say any more about it here, but dang, it's a good ending. Anyway, as far as Dexter is concerned, we are getting a 9th season. The producers have a chance to satisfy the loose ends that were left hanging in the previous series finale. I think it's a pretty safe bet to assume that Dexter isn't going to make it out of this one alive. And while that does take a bit of the wind out of the season 9 sails for me, I could not be more excited about it. It's time for me to head on over to Netflix and start back at the very beginning to live through Dexter's trials and tribulations one more time in preparation for the new episodes that come out this September. As a lover of entertainment, I strongly suggest that you go out and watch the show. It might get a bit uncomfortable at times, and I know I've looked away from the screen at more than one point during the series, but the storytelling and the character development is just too good to ignore. I truly hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Happy Nightmares podcast, and I can't wait to talk with all of you about Dexter's new adventures once we get to experience it. If you're not listening to this on YouTube, check out our YouTube channel, Happy Nightmares, for horror fiction narrated by yours truly, true accounts of encounters with the paranormal, dark instrumental music, and the video version of this podcast. Link in the description of this episode, or just visit youtube.com/havehappynightmares. It is the perfect place for all of the creepy content that you crave. And if you do that, and you feel so inclined, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and let us know what you thought of the discussion. If your podcast platform allows you to rate the podcast or leave a review, please take a couple minutes to do so. It will really help this podcast show up on more people's suggested shows and genre searches. For information on upcoming topics for both this podcast and the Happy Nightmares YouTube channel in general, follow us on social media. We are at Have Happy Nightmares on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. We are at YT Happy Nightmare with no E on the end on Twitter. Have a topic idea or a story idea, or just want to give me a piece of your mind, shoot us an email. havehappynightmares@gmail.com. Thank you again so much for being here and for listening to this episode of the Happy Nightmares podcast. I hope you have enjoyed today's discussion, and I cannot wait to talk at you again in the next episode. Until then, and as always, happy nightmares.
This has been the Happy Nightmares podcast. Visit our YouTube channel, Happy Nightmares, for more of the creepy content you crave.
Oh, come on.